The chandelier trembled as if the air itself carried a warning. Crystal beads clinked against each other in a sound far too sharp for such a refined room. Guests shifted nervously, their silk gowns and tailored suits rustling like whispers of panic. It was supposed to be the grandest night of the year, the annual Gala of Harrington Global Enterprises, a company that fed empires and ruled markets. But something was already wrong. The stage was empty. No band, no music, no escape from the silence that spread like a crack across polished marble floors. The master of ceremonies fumbled for words, his voice breaking as he announced that the renowned orchestra, worth millions in contracts and publicity, had been delayed indefinitely. A murmur rose, first confusion, then ridicule, then anger. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a woman in a faded gray uniform lowered her eyes and kept sweeping. She had been invisible all night, as she always was. But her pulse raced now, because she could hear more than words in the room. She could hear the unraveling of pride, the collapse of image, the collective breath of a powerful suffocating in humiliation. And buried deep inside her, something stirred. Her name was Elena Marquez, 32 years old. Born in silence, raised in scarcity, now scrubbing the floors of billionaires. But tonight, she carried with her something that no one in the room could imagine. A secret, one she had hidden like a forbidden's flame. The CEO himself, Victor Harrington, stood near the stage, his jaw tight, his reputation hanging by a thread. For him, appearances meant everything. Every deal, every contract, every global headline relied on the perfection of his empire. And now on this night, with investors and rivals watching, everything was falling apart. "Elena," whispered the older maid beside her, clutching her arm. "Don't even think about it." But Elena's gaze was already drawn to the stage. Her hands itched, not for the broom, but for the memory of strings beneath her fingertips. Her father's violin had been her world once before poverty-drowned dreams and left her bowless, voiceless, nameless. She had buried that part of herself years ago. Yet now, in this suffocating silence, her secret screamed. Guests mocked openly now. Millions for an event and not even background music? One investor scoffed, swirling his champagne. "A Harrington failure," another whispered. Victor's face flushed, rage simmering beneath his cold, polished exterior. And then Elena made a decision. She leaned her broom against the wall, wiped her trembling hands against her apron, and stepped toward the small side table near the stage where an untouched violin part of the orchestra's shipment rested in its case. She had noticed it earlier, abandoned in the rush of disaster. Every step felt like walking into fire. The crowd didn't see her at first, too absorbed in their gossip. But when she climbed the side stairs and walked toward the violin, asps spread like wildfire. What is the cleaning girl doing up there? Security. Someone stop her. Victor himself narrowed his eyes, recognition delayed by disbelief. Elena Marquez was not supposed to exist in the spotlight. She was supposed to remain background, faceless, replaceable. Yet there she stood, lifting the violin with hands that shook but did not falter. She positioned it beneath her chin, the bow trembling in the air. For a split second, she doubted herself. Maybe she would be laughed at, dragged out, humiliated beyond repair. But then she closed her eyes, and the memory of her father teaching her in a one-room apartment, the sound of music filling hunger with hope, came rushing back. The first note sliced through the silence, like light piercing darkness. Sharp, clear, unforgiving. The room froze. No one breathed. The chandeliers ceased trembling, as if the universe itself had paused to listen. Elena played. Not the rehearsed, commercial kind of performance expected from paid orchestras. No, this was raw, bleeding, untamed. Every stroke of the bow carried the weight of survival, of humiliation endured, of dreams abandoned and resurrected. The melody rose, dark and haunting, then softened like a confession whispered at midnight. It was beauty carved out of wounds. And slowly, the room changed. Investors lowered their glasses. Critics swallowed their words. Women clutched pearls not in vanity, but in awe. Some had tears foaming before they realized. Even Victor, the man whose empire could buy silence or applause, found himself stripped of arrogance, unable to command what was happening. The janitor was stealing his gala. Minutes stretched into eternity. Elena's music told stories no speech could rival, of hunger, of resilience, of dignity that money could never purchase. Each note carved cracks into marble walls of indifference, forcing the powerful to feel something they had long forgotten: humility. When the last note faded, silence returned, not the mocking silence of failure, but reverent stillness. Then, like thunder delayed, applause erupted. Not polite claps, not obligatory gestures. A storm of hands, voices, and tears. Victor's empire had been saved, but not by him. By her. Elena lowered the violin, chest heaving, and suddenly remembered where she stood. Fear crashed back in. She was just the cleaning woman. She had crossed lines that should never be crossed. Surely, consequences would follow. Victor Harrington stepped forward, his face unreadable. The crowd parted, eyes flickering between them, hungry for drama. He stopped in front of her, towering, powerful, the embodiment of wealth and control. His voice cut through the noise, sharp as glass. "Who are you?" Elena's throat closed. She opened her mouth, but only fragments escaped. Just staff. But Victor's gaze lingered, piercing deeper than anyone ever had. Something about her presence unsettled him, not just her audacity, but the familiarity of her music. It stirred a memory he didn't want to name. The applause died down, and whispers returned. Some celebrated the miracle. Others questioned the scandal. A janitor saving the Harrington Gala? A humiliation disguised as triumph? Reporters were already scribbling, their pens carving headlines. And yet, beneath the triumph, danger loomed. Because Elena's secret was not just her ability to play. No, her secret was much darker. And tonight, the first thread had been pulled. Victor turned back to the crowd, his smile restored, polished and hollow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Harrington Global thanks you for your patience. What you witnessed tonight was unexpected brilliance. Let us continue the celebration." The ballroom erupted again, music resuming as background staff scrambled to recover. But Elena knew it wasn't over. The eyes of the powerful had found her. And Victor Harrington would not let this mystery go unanswered. Later that night, while guests drowned in champagne and deals whispered over dessert, Elena was cornered in the service hallway. Victor himself waited, his shadow cutting across the dim light. "You play like someone trained by masters," he said, his voice low. "Yet you clean floors in my house. Explain." Elena swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "It was nothing, sir. Just something I learned as a child." Victor studied her, suspicion growing. "You're lying." Her pulse pounded. She wanted to run, but his presence pinned her like a hawk over prey. He leaned closer, his voice colder. "Who are you, Elena Marquez? And why do I feel as though I've heard your music before?" Her heart skipped. He had heard it before, long ago. A past neither of them wanted unearthed. Because Elena's father had once stood before Victor Harrington, not as a janitor, but as a rival. A brilliant composer, silenced and ruined by the same empire that now stood above her. And tonight, Elena had brought that voice back from the dead. Elena froze in the narrow hallway, the cold marble walls pressing in as if they too demanded answers. Victor Harrington's stare was relentless, his jaw set in that controlled, calculating way that made his rivals tremble at boardroom tables. But this was no negotiation. This was interrogation. She forced her voice steady. I clean your halls, Mr. Harrington. That's all I am. Nothing more." Victor tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "No one plays like you by accident. Talent like that isn't born in shadows. It's trained, honed, paid for. Who gave it to you?" Her breath hitched. A name hovered on her tongue, but it was a ghost she wasn't ready to unleash. Julian Marquez, her father. The man who once dared to compete against Victor's empire, whose symphonies had threatened to eclipse the Harrington legacy until the night his contracts vanished, his career destroyed, and his spirit broken. Elena had been a child, too young to understand power, but old enough to remember her father's despair as he whispered, "They silenced me." And now his daughter stood in the heart of that same empire. "I'm self-taught," Elena whispered, though the lie burned her tongue. Old sheet music, borrowed instruments, scraps, nothing more. Victor leaned closer, so near she could smell the faint trace of cologne and wine. His voice dropped into something darker, almost personal. "You think I don't recognize what I hear? That was not scraps. That was blood and discipline and legacy. You are hiding something, Elena Marquez, and I intend to know what." Her knees trembled, but she refused to break. If he uncovered her father's name, if he pieced together the past, everything could collapse. For years she had stayed invisible, surviving on silence. Tonight she had broken that silence, and now the storm had come for her. Victor straightened, eyes still locked on her, and after a long pause, he spoke with chilling finality. "You work for me, which means your secrets belong to me now. Don't forget that." Then he turned, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Elena trembling in the dim light, clutching the violin as though it were both shield and curse. The days that followed were unbearable. The gala performance spread like wildfire across media outlets. Headlines read, "Harrington Gala saved by mystery violinist." From mop to maestro, who is the janitor who stunned the elite? A corporate disaster turned miracle performance. Elena's anonymity was slipping away. Guests who once ignored her now pointed, whispered, asked questions she couldn't answer. Some treated her as novelty, others with genuine admiration, but to her, all of it was dangerous. Victor, however, remained unreadable. He neither praised nor punished her. Instead, he watched. At every encounter passing in corridors, brief exchanges during staff rounds, his eyes lingered too long, as if dissecting her soul. Elena knew it wasn't curiosity alone. It was recognition clawing at him, pulling threads of memory he hadn't yet unraveled. One evening, while cleaning the library, his private sanctuary, Elena's hand paused over the spine of a book. It was a collection of classical compositions, embossed with faded gold. She recognized one immediately, a silent requiem, her father's most treasured piece. Her stomach twisted. Behind her, a voice cut through the silence. "You know that one, don't you?" She spun. Victor stood in the doorway, framed by shadows, glass of brandy in hand. His tone was calm, but his eyes blazed with suspicion. I've seen it before," Elena stammered. Victor stepped closer, placing his drink on the mahogany desk. "When you played at the gala, I heard pieces of this phrases, whispers of Marquez's work. It's impossible you don't know it." Her heart stopped. He had spoken the name. "Marquez," Victor repeated, tasting it like venom. "A name I haven't heard in decades. Tell me, Elena, what exactly are you hiding?" She couldn't run. She couldn't lie anymore. The storm had arrived. "My father," she whispered, the words trembling from her lips. "Julian Marquez." Victor froze. The silence between them stretched like a wire ready to snap. His eyes flickered with something unguarded shock, recognition, and something darker, almost guilt. "Your father," he said slowly, his voice laced with disbelief. "The man who thought he could rival me. The man who vanished after certain failures. Her fists clenched. Failures you orchestrated. You ruined him. Victor's expression hardened, but his voice remained icy calm. Business is war, Elena. Your father was naive. He thought talent alone could defy power. He was wrong. Her chest burned. He was silenced. You stole contracts, destroyed his reputation, and left him with nothing. I watched him die piece by piece while you built your empire on his grave. For the first time, Victor's composure wavered. He looked away, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, though he hadn't touched it. Memories flickered across his features, of backroom deals, of crushed rivals, of victories that tasted of ash. You shouldn't have come here, he muttered. I didn't come for you, Elena said, her voice steadier now. I came to survive, to work, to disappear. But that night, when I played, I wasn't thinking of you. I was thinking of him. Victor's eyes snapped back to hers, sharp again. Then you should think carefully now, because survival depends on silence. If anyone learns what you just told me about your father, about me, it will not end in applause next time. A chill ran down her spine. She knew he meant it, but silence was no longer possible. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread beyond the Gala. Journalists dug deeper, chasing Elena's past. One persistent reporter cornered her after her shift, shoving a recorder toward her face. Ms. Marquez, is it true you're related to Julian Marquez, the composer destroyed in the Harrington scandals of the past? Is that why you play the way you do? Elena froze, panic surging. Before she could answer, a heavy hand landed on the reporter's shoulder. Victor's head of security, cold-eyed and imposing, stepped forward. The lady has no comment. The reporter scowled but backed away. Elena's relief was fleeting because she realized Victor wasn't protecting her. He was controlling the story. That night, Victor summoned her again. In his private office, towering windows cast moonlight over steel and glass. He poured 2 glasses of wine, setting one in front of her. You're becoming a liability, he said, his tone clipped but calm. The world loves a scandal, and you are one waiting to explode. Elena straightened, her anger finally outweighing her fear. You want me silent because you're afraid the truth will stain your empire. Victor's lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. Truth is relative, Elena. History belongs to those who write it. Your father forgot that. Don't make the same mistake. Her hand shook as she gripped the glass. I am not afraid of you. His gaze lingered on her, long and sharp, until something flickered admiration, resentment, both. Finally, he leaned back. Then you're either brave or foolish. Perhaps both. What neither of them knew was that someone else had already begun connecting the dots. Someone powerful. At the next board meeting, whispers spread about the janitor violinist who had stolen headlines. Investors weren't just amused. They were intrigued. Harrington Global's image had been saved not by Victor's wealth, but by a woman hidden among the staff. Questions arose. Who was she? Where had she come from? Could this story be used, or could it be dangerous? Victor controlled the narrative as best he could, calling her a surprise talent discovered among the team and framing it as proof of Harrington's culture of opportunity. But every time he spoke the words, his eyes flicked to Elena, warning her in silence. Do not speak. Elena stayed quiet, but silence carried its own cost. She could feel the weight of her father's memory pressing against her chest, begging for justice. Each night, as she lay in her small apartment, the sound of her own playing haunted her. She had awakened something she could no longer bury, and she wasn't alone. Because one evening, as she left the estate, a black car pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down, revealing an older man with sharp features and silver hair. Elena Marquez? He asked, his accent faint but deliberate. My name is Samuel Crane. I was once your father's closest ally. And I think it's time you learned the truth about what really happened. Her world tilted. The truth was larger, darker, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The name Samuel Crane lingered in the night air like a riddle Elena wasn't ready to solve. His gaze, steady and unreadable, carried weight, like a man who had witnessed too much and survived only by silence. My father's ally? She whispered, clutching her worn coat tighter. Samuel nodded. Julian was more than a rival to Harrington. He was dangerous because he held something Victor couldn't buy. A composition, a manuscript, an idea that could have shifted power in ways you don't yet understand. Elena's heart pounded. What do you mean? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Your father wrote a symphony. Not just music something encoded, something buried within the notes. He believed art could reveal corruption, expose what words and documents could not. He showed it to me once, swore it could ruin Harrington if played to the right audience. And then it vanished, along with him. Elena's knees weakened. The violin in her hands suddenly felt heavier, as if carrying more than sound. You're saying, my father died because of him? Samuel's eyes hardened. Ask yourself why Victor Harrington recognized your playing. He didn't just hear talent. He heard fragments of that hidden symphony. Her throat tightened. That night at the Gala, she hadn't meant to play her father's work. It had simply risen out of her, stitched into her fingers. She had carried it unknowingly all along. Samuel pressed a card into her hand. I can help you, but only if you want the truth. Then the car rolled away, leaving her under the cold glow of streetlights, her mind spinning with questions that could devour her. The following week was unbearable. Elena moved through her shifts like a ghost, haunted by fragments of melodies that now felt like messages from the grave. She avoided Victor's gaze, but he noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes tracked her with an intensity that bordered on obsession. One night, while polishing the grand piano in the ballroom, Elena paused and pressed a key, then another. The sound echoed against marble and glass, sharp and lonely. She closed her eyes and let her fingers wander into the first notes of her father's hidden symphony. Again, a voice said. She spun. Victor stood in the doorway, his suit jacket loosened, his tie undone. For once, the mask of the untouchable CEO seemed cracked, his face shadowed with something raw. Play it again, he repeated, stepping closer. Her breath caught. You recognized it, didn't you? Victor's jaw tightened. He poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter, though his hand shook faintly. Your father gave me no choice. He flaunted his brilliance, threatened to reveal things that could destroy more than me. He was reckless. And in business, recklessness is death. Her voice shook with rage. You ruined him. You stole his music, his life, everything. Victor slammed the glass down, shattering it against the table. Do you think I don't know that? His voice cracked, then steadied, colder. Do you think I sleep at night without hearing the echoes of every man I bury? Your father was not the first. He won't be the last, but he is the one I can't seem to forget. And now here you are. Elena's chest tightened. In that moment, she saw the truth. Victor Harrington was both monster and prisoner. His empire was a cage he had built out of other men's ruins, and her father's ghost was the chain around his neck. You want silence, Elena said quietly, but you also want redemption. His eyes locked onto hers, burning with a conflict he could never admit. And then the door burst open. Samuel Crane entered, flanked by two figures Elena didn't recognize journalists, their recorders already flashing red. Play it, Elena, Samuel said, his voice firm. Play your father's symphony. Let the world hear what he tried to hide. Victor's face drained of color. Don't you dare? Elena stood frozen, her hands trembling above the keys. The moment stretched into eternity, her father's voice in her memory, Victor's warning echoing in her chest, Samuel's demand pressing against her like a blade. If she played, she could expose everything. But she could also destroy herself. Harrington Global had power enough to bury her alive. Victor stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. If you do this, you will never walk free again. They'll use you, discard you, and you'll end up like him, forgotten. Samuel countered, his eyes fierce. If you don't, his death remains meaningless. Justice dies with your silence. Elena's fingers trembled above the keys. She closed her eyes, and then she played. The first notes filled the ballroom, heavy and deliberate. Not the polished elegance she had offered at the gala. This was raw, jagged, filled with anger and grief. The journalists leaned forward, recording every sound, their faces pale as they realized this was more than music. Hidden within the melody were patterns mathematical, coded, undeniable. Proof of financial manipulations, signatures of fraud, the collapse of empires disguised as art. Her father had buried truth in beauty, and now it was rising, impossible to silence. Victor staggered back, his hand gripping the edge of the table as though the notes themselves cut into him. His empire, his legacy, everything he had built on silence and destruction. It was unraveling in sound. When the final note faded, the room fell into silence. The journalists stared at one another, their recorders still glowing. Samuel's face was wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. And Victor Harrington. Victor sank into the chair, his head in his hands, a titan finally crushed beneath the weight of truth. Elena lowered her hands, her chest heaving, her soul both burning and freed. For the first time in years, she felt her father's presence not as a ghost, but as vindication. The fallout was immediate. News outlets exploded with revelations. Investigations reopened. Harrington Global's stock plummeted, board members scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. Victor's carefully constructed empire crumbled under the weight of coded confessions no one could refute. And Elena? She vanished from the estate. Some said she fled the city, fearing retaliation. Others claimed she signed with orchestras under a different name, her music filling halls across Europe. A few whispered that she returned to Samuel Crane, helping rebuild the legacy her father had been denied. But the truth was simpler. Elena chose freedom. In a small, hidden apartment, she played the violin every night, not for applause, not for revenge, but for herself. Her father's music lived through her, unchained, unstoppable. As for Victor Harrington, he was last seen stepping down from his empire, his name stripped from the company he had built. Some said he lived in exile, haunted by the sound of a violin. Others swore they saw him in the back of concert halls, listening in silence, as if searching for the forgiveness he would never receive. Elena never looked for him. She no longer needed to. Because in the end, the janitor had stolen not just a gala, not just headlines, but an empire built on silence. And she had given the world back its voice.